Marvellous. Now then, in terms of your main policies, one that sort of jumps out to a lot of people is that you are actually in favour of a referendum on the EU. Like, I mean, to that extent, you're alongside UKIP, probably in no other circumstances, but you are. Explain to me why you're in favour of a referendum.
Very simply, we believe in democracy. We trust the voters. You have to be in your late 50s to have had a chance previously to vote. But what we would be doing in that referendum, if it goes forward, we would be campaigning to remain in the EU, but we very much want a reformed EU. And if you think of sort of shorthand what we mean by reform, I mean 180 degrees opposite to what Mr Cameron means by reform. So we want an EU that works for communities, for people, decision-making made locally, not centralised on Brussels, and not privileging multinational companies.
So
and definitely
EU without Brussels, as it were.
Well, making decisions at the right level, and we're definitely opposed to the proposed EU-US free trade deal known as TTIP. That could be absolutely disastrous for our democracy and for our quality of standards of workers' rights, environmental standards, and many other things.
Now, a radical shift in the EU in that direction might seem to a lot of people completely impossible, but presumably you look at Syriza in Greece and you look at other anti-austerity parties doing quite well in Spain and Italy and so forth, and you see the beginnings of a new European confederation of left-green parties coming.
Exactly. It's a question of who gets elected to the Parliament, and we want to see the Parliament have more power, be more democratic. But, you know, that whole anti-austerity agenda, that we're very simply saying that the poor, the disadvantaged, the young, cannot be continued to pay for the errors and fraud of the bankers. And you know, austerity has failed even in its own terms. It's the wrong direction. We need to invest in the future.
Unlike UKIP, however, you believe that immigration is not really much of a problem for this country.
Well, what we recognise is that we should accept the rights of people who should be able to be here, and we're not doing that at the moment. We're not treating refugees properly. Britons aren't able to live in their own country with spouses or partners. And you know, what we have to do is, when people say to me on the doorstep, I'm concerned about immigration, and I say, you know, what are you really concerned about? They usually say three things: low wages, housing, expensive housing, my children can't get a council house, or crowded schools and hospitals. Yeah. All of those things are caused by failed government policies. They're not caused by immigration.
Given what's going on in the Middle East, given what's going on in Africa, there are almost endless numbers of people who would like to come here. And if your policies are for effectively an open door, that would greatly increase immigration in this country with possibly serious social effects.
Let me clarify. What I said was people who should have a right to be here should be here. We're not talking about open door. But, you know, if people arrive on our doorstep as refugees, we should be accepting them. We should be the Syrian refugees. We've refused to join the UN programme that would help the most vulnerable refugees. Germany has taken 20,000 of the most vulnerable refugees out of Syria. We've taken, the last figure I saw was 90 under our own special programme. We are a wealthy country. We have a responsibility to be reasonable. And
but you actually, in a sense, you don't mind us getting a bit poorer. You've said that growth should not be the be-all and end-all, and actually if the economy shrinks, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So, if we're going to be poorer, what should we be spending less money on ourselves? What would that feel like?
Well, one of the easiest things, of course, is Trident nuclear weapons replacement. 100 billion over its lifetime. We don't, you know, there's lots of things we need to invest in. We need to spend money on warm, comfortable, affordable to heat homes for everybody. We need to not spend 15 billion on roads, but spend that on public transport instead. Okay. We should not build extra runways in the southeast.
All right. We might have, if the polls are right, a very, very evenly balanced a range of parties, which you may have a few MPs, but yet be quite important in forming another government. And therefore, it's interesting to know whether Trident, getting rid of Trident, would be an absolute red line for you. Would you deal with any party that was going to keep Trident nuclear submarines?
Well, at the moment, we're not talking red lines. What we're saying is that's our policy. You know, we joined with the SNP and Plaid to get together to say, we're here, people vote for us. No, they're voting anti-Trident, they're voting anti-austerity. You know, we've got Greens around the country, 43,000 Green members of England and Wales as of this morning. That's double where we were 2 months ago. People are getting the chance to hear our message and they're liking it.
A little bit like Mr Clegg and tuition fees last time round. You can say you're against Trident, but actually come the time you might be inside a government which is keeping Trident.
No, we have very clearly said we're not looking towards a coalition, we're looking towards confidence and supply. So what that would mean, we would be able to vote by vote, so we can vote against Trident, and yet we would vote against Trident.
One other really big issue, of course, is your economic policy. You want to give a kind of citizen's income, I think you call it, of £80 a week to everybody in the country, regardless of whether they're in prison, whether they're asylum seekers or anything. Now, this has been costed at £240 billion a year, which seems an extraordinary amount of money. How are you possibly going to raise the money for that?
Well, first of all, in terms of what we need to do broadly across the economy, we need to make rich individuals and particularly multinational companies pay their taxes. Under this government, corporate tax take is down 14%. And in terms of the citizens' income, it's worth saying that what that would do is, as soon as you're earning any sort of reasonable amount of money, the tax system takes that back. But what the universal citizens' income offers is a sense of security.
A guaranteed lower floor.
No one needs to live in fear. No one needs to think, I've just been sanctioned, I cannot put food on the table, I'm going to lose my house next week. We have to get away from that insecurity and fear that's so permeating our society.
Finally, to make all that happen, you do need to raise income taxes on the better off, don't you?
Well, we've already announced a wealth tax for people who are worth more than £3 million, a tax of 1 to 2%. That would raise about a quarter to a half of the cost of the NHS. And that's a recognition of the fact that wealthy people get their wealth from society. If you're a company, you have workers, you have customers, they should pay back fairly for the wealth that they're gaining.
Now, if you're able to take part in the TV debate, those are the kind of points you'll be making. We're going to come back to that later in the programme. But for now, Natalie Bennett, thank you very much indeed.